Start at Exodus chapter 4, or 3, I guess, chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, while the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Well, he said, and then in verse 5, he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place wherein thou standest is holy ground. So we see here the calling of Moses to he's going to called him to lead the nation of Israel out of bondage. And you probably all know the story here. Verse 4 there, it says, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, then God called him. I think that struck me as something God, when Moses turned to see why the bush was not burnt, then God called him. It took a little bit of something on Moses' part to get to before God would call him. It's by God's grace that he called Moses, not because of anything Moses did. I think grace is something we take for granted here in this day and age. Something I realized here a while back, John Newton wrote Amazing Grace. And even he believed in eternal security. I believe that second verse says, Through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Not works will lead me home, but grace will lead me home. So grace is, I think we take that for granted. And we're not just saved by grace, but we're kept by grace. 1 Peter 1:5, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. I meant to start out with something else. I'll throw it in here now. I don't know if anybody's seen the new couch we have back here in the room for the preachers if they need to rest, or somebody gets sick, you can go back there and sit down. I heard Miss Yvonne, I believe, got that couch, and she was told they can set 4 people with no problems. But she said she can't find 4 people with no problems. We all have problems, don't we? Well, the question I have is, why did Moses turn? It says to see the bush that was not burnt. I kind of think about our life when trouble comes, and people are watching us, I think. I know I used to watch my friends that claimed to be Christians before I got saved. I was watching them like a hawk, I think they're watching us to see when trouble comes, are we going to burn up? Or are we going to stay in the fight? So people are watching us. Matthew 5:14 tells us, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." A few years ago, we went up to Mount Rushmore, South Dakota, and the Black Hills, and I was wondering why they called it the Black Hills. Well, up there, it's pretty much flat until this one bunch of hills out in the middle of nowhere, and they've got green trees all over them. But from a distance, they're dark. They look black, and that's why they call them the Black Hills. But they kind of stand out from way off in the distance. You can see them. Be like putting a candle up on a candlestick. You can see it from a distance. That's the way our life ought to be. I hope I don't do too much preaching tonight. I've been accused of preaching every now and then, but we'll see how it goes. This is what God gave me. But we go through some hard times now and then, and people are watching us. Heard a story once. There's a famous preacher. He told the story when he was young in high school. He was a good baseball player. He's a pitcher, a star pitcher. And anytime he pitched, they had a very good chance of winning. And he was the preacher's son. His daddy was a preacher, and he told them when they started he wouldn't play on Sunday. Well, sure enough, come at the end of the season, went through the tournament, and the final game was on Sunday evening. And he told them, "I'm not going to play." And he was up to pitch, and they was all upset with him. When he went to church, the whole team was across the street calling him all kinds of bad names. Well, sure enough, they lost, and he lost some friends over it. Years later, he said he'd become a preacher, evangelist, and was in a neighboring town preaching a revival meeting. And a guy come up to him afterwards and said, you probably don't remember me, but I was on that baseball team. And I was one of the guys across the street calling you all kinds of bad names and hollering at you. I just want to tell you, I'm sorry about that. I've since then gotten saved. But honestly, you had something. I saw something in you that day that I wanted. He didn't realize it for all those years, but it did make a difference. His stand made a difference. So people are watching. We may not realize it, but people are watching. And sometimes God puts us through hard times. So I think, we can be a witness for him. 1 Peter 4:12 tells us, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice inasmuch as you are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. And if ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye. For the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you, and their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified." So that's how we can glorify God. Of course, some people have to hit rock bottom before we ever look up. Made me think about a guy I learned about here a while back. Louis Zamperini was his name. I don't know if I told this story or not, but I'm going to tell it again. He was born in 1917. He was an Olympic runner. I believe he ran in the 1936 Olympics. After the Olympics, he joined the Army and was on a search and rescue mission, and mechanical difficulties caused the bomber that they were on to crash into the ocean 800 miles south of Hawaii. He survived 47 days in a raft, landed on the Marshall Islands eventually, and was captured immediately by the Japanese. Spent, I think, 2 or 3 years in a Japanese POW camp, was tortured terribly. But in an interview, he said that when he was on that raft, he prayed to God. He'd never even considered God in his life before that. But when you have nowhere else to turn, you look up. When he was in prison, he said he prayed. He was eventually released at the end of the war. They've actually made a movie about him called Unbroken. It's kind of rough, a lot of torture, but it's kind of interesting. But he eventually married, but struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. He had nightmares of strangling his guards. He started drinking to help forget. Didn't help. On one occasion, he woke up and he was strangling his wife. So she decided she wanted a divorce. But about that time, Billy Graham held a crusade in Los Angeles. She went to the crusade, got saved, gave her life to Christ, decided she didn't want a divorce. Eventually, talked him into going to the crusade, and he got saved and forgave his captors. And he said that's when the nightmares stopped. Later, Billy Graham helped him launch a new career as a Christian evangelist, and one of his recurring themes was forgiveness. He visited Tokyo, and many of the guards from his POW days, and he let them know that he had forgiven them. So sometimes we have to hit rock bottom. Sometimes we wonder why God puts us through that. Another story I thought about was Johnny Erickson Tata. Does anybody here have ever heard of Johnny Erickson Tata? A few? Well, she was born in 1949. She's a young teenager, blonde, beautiful, really active in sports and fishing. And one day they were out swimming, and she jumped into the Chesapeake Bay, and the water was shallow, more shallow than what she thought. She hit the bottom and paralyzed her from the shoulders down. And I've heard her testimony. She said during her rehabilitation, she had went through every emotion you could think of. She experienced anger, depression, suicidal thoughts, religious doubts. And she said once her testimony was that as she was a young girl, she would go to church and hear the preaching and regret her life and some of the things that she was doing. And she'd repent, pray, and cry. And then the next Friday and Saturday night, she'd find herself in the back seat of a car somewhere, doing it all over again. She finally got to the point, she said, God, I want you to intervene in my life some way, somehow. I don't want to continue this way. And after the accident, she said, God, I know I wanted you to intervene, but this is ridiculous. She didn't want him to intervene that way. You know, sometimes his plans are different than ours. But she said later on, now she realizes that she wouldn't have it any other way, because there's no way she could have reached as many people as she did if she wouldn't have been paralyzed. She's an interesting lady. see all of her accomplishments sometime. But back to Moses. In chapter 4, verse 1. And Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me. This is when God called him to lead the nation of Israel. He said, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. For they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, what is that in thine hand? And he said, a rod. And he said, cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. So Moses, pretty smart guy, running from that snake. And that reminded me of my days back when I was a teenager. I worked one summer at the Thursday sale barn where they sold cows, and worked in the back alley. And we all had a stick, a club or a rod. This is what you poked them with or hit them when they come by. You had to keep them moving. And I found these hickory, straight, smooth, very few limbs, and they made perfect clubs to hit them cows with. And them cows, remember, it's not being mean. You know, we weren't mean to them. They're covered with cowhide. They're tough. But I started supplying hickory clubs to all the guys up there. I can imagine Moses with his rod or staff. Imagine sitting on the hillside watching the sheep. He did that for 40 years. He was a shepherd for 40 years, sitting on the hillside watching the sheep. Probably got bored, maybe some. Probably got out his pocket knife and started whittling on his rod and made the handle smooth, or maybe put his name on it and became, kind of proud of it. Or thinking about maybe David when he was a shepherd. Maybe the day he killed that bear, maybe he, carved a bear in it. I could imagine, the rod being something they'd be kind of proud of. That's mine, I'd kind of liken it to your life. God said, throw it down. And then it became a snake. Our life, when we control it, it's like a snake. We can't control it. But God said, he said, throw it down. And then he said, it became a snake. And God said, pick it up by the tail. Well, if you know much about snakes, you don't want to pick it up by the tail. You can't control it that way, can you? But God was in control. And Moses didn't argue about that. He argued about going and leading the nation, but he didn't argue about picking up the snake. He said, throw it down. And it became a snake. Who wants a snake? No. I wished I had a bigger one. You want a snake? You just... he picked it up by the tail, and God was in control. That's kind of like our life, I think. Better off if God's in control of it. Leave it right there. But it was, it's the rod. Adam Clark said about verse 4, he put forth his hand and caught it. Considering that Moses fled from the serpent, it required considerable faith to obey God. I can imagine it was probably a big snake. It's probably a big rod. Probably bigger than this. Probably maybe had a hook on the top of it. Them shepherds had a shepherd's hook with a crook on it. and it ended up eating the Pharaoh's serpents, snakes that they had. It was probably a big snake. Took some faith to do that. Well, Moses had faith in God that he'd take care of it. We need complete faith and obedience to conquer all the difficulties that God gives us. Verse 6, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put it into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. So we see here God helping Moses to have faith enough to do what God was asking him to do. And this was a sign for the nation of Israel to have faith also. But I think it is for Moses too. The staff, it played a crucial role in the deliverance during the plagues of that came upon Egypt. He touched the Red Sea with it, and it became blood. When they came to the Red Sea, he used the staff, and the waters parted. So he used that staff later. One thing you'll notice in chapter 4, verse 2, there at the end of it, it says a rod. That's what Moses had, a rod. Over in verse 17, it's this rod. And then down in verse 20, it says, and Moses took the rod of God in his hand. So there's a transition there. It was Moses' rod, but now we see it's the rod of God. And like I said, that I'd liken that into our life. As we become Christians, it's not our life anymore. It's God's. We've been bought with a price. You know, one thing, when I got saved, the preacher came by my house one night, Thursday night, and led me to the Lord. He told me my sins could be forgiven. I could go to heaven when I died. But he didn't tell me that bad things may happen to me along the way because I became a Christian. There's a verse, I wrote that down somewhere. It says, if we live godly, we'll suffer persecution. Preacher didn't tell me that. And, you know, I've led a few people to the Lord, and I don't tell them that. Kind of like taking a job. I took a job once. They said, all right, we want you to run this machine. So I get in there, and I find out there's more to it. I had to clean it. I had to sweep up the chips at the end of the day. I had to oil it, you know. Had all this paperwork I had to do. They didn't tell me all that stuff when I took the job. Kind of like God, when we become a Christian, there's more to it. But, you know, some people may say, well, I didn't sign up for that. When hard times come, they bail. They're out of here. But God, He has a way of asking us to do some things we might not want to do sometimes. Moses didn't want to lead the nation of Israel, tried to talk God out of it. Jonah, you know, he didn't want to do what God wanted him to. He ran, but God eventually convinced him that it's better to do God's way. But this staff the staff of God, or the rod of God, it symbolizes guidance and support. In addition to authority, the staff symbolizes guidance and support. The shepherds used it to lead and protect their flocks, making the staff a fitting symbol for God's guidance and care for his people. Psalms 23:4 tells us beautifully, it captures this imagery. It says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." So it's a symbol of comfort. It also symbolizes judgment and correction. You know, they used it for correction of those sheep when they were out there. Also symbolizes divine provision and miracles, as Moses used it for miracles as he was leading the nation of Israel out of bondage. During his wilderness wanderings in Numbers 20, verse 8 and 11, God instructs Moses to take the staff and speak to the rock to bring forth water for the Israelites. Although Moses disobeys by striking the rock, this time the staff remains a symbol of God's provision. Water came gushing out of that rock. And think about this, there was maybe 2 million people he had to give water to. So it had to have been a lot of water. Probably kind of like the Red River when it's flowing. There's a lot of water. But the staff also symbolizes royalty, kingship. The scepter would be a type of the staff. Genesis 49:10 tells us, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be." This prophecy, of course, it points to the enduring role of the Davidic line, Jesus eventually coming from that line, who he's talking about with that scepter. Another man that God used, brought some things in his life, was Job. You know, Job was rich, richest man in the world probably at that time. Allowed the devil to take everything away from him. Probably not in Job's plan to do that, allow that to happen. And then he didn't sin through that, and the devil went back to God and said, "Yeah, but if you'll let me touch his body, he'll curse you." So God said, "Okay, you can have his body. You can touch his body, but don't kill him. You can do anything, but don't kill him." It's pretty rough. Can you imagine that? Having head, boils from his head to his feet, wanting to die. Job wanted to die, cursed the day he was born. What struck me, though, in chapter 2, verse 9, then said his wife unto him, "Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die." His wife, she had lost everything too. And then in verse 10, he said unto her, "Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips." So, yeah, we're going to receive a lot of good stuff, but we're going to receive some bad stuff too. What are you going to do when the bad times come? You're going to bail? You're going to say, "Well, I didn't sign up for that. I'm out of here." Or are we going to put our nose to the grindstone and keep going? Heard a message a few years ago Brother Ron Osteen preached. In John 15:1, he says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Brother Osteen said, the vine that produces the fruit gets the knife. So we're going to get purged every now and then. We're going to get the knife. We're going to have to do things maybe that we didn't plan on. Things are going to come our way. We're going to be liable to get the knife. But Jesus tells us, Matthew 11:28, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Deuteronomy 31:6, be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, He it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Hebrews 13:5, let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Joshua 1:5, there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. I believe that's a promise he's given to us Christians also. He's not going to leave us. Not going to forsake us. But I think we can look at this in another light. The New Testament parallel of the rod, the staff of God, would be our cross. Jesus said, Mark 10:17, and when he was gone forth into the way, there came one running and kneeled to him and asked him, Good Master, what shall I do that I may inherit eternal life? Here's the story of the rich young ruler. And Jesus said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. Thou knowest the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not kill. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Defraud not. Honor thy father and mother. And he answered and said unto him, Master, all these things have I observed from my youth. I think maybe he stopped Jesus before he got to the first, what we would call the first of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Well, Jesus is going to try to teach this man a lesson. Verse 21, Then Jesus, beholding him, loved him. Jesus loved him. He wanted to help him. He was trying to help him. And he said unto him, One thing thou lackest. Go thy way, sell whatsoever thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven. And come, take up the cross and follow me. So Jesus tells that to take up the cross. Take up thy cross numerous times in the New Testament. Jesus tells that. Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Well, the cross nowadays is a symbol of Christianity. But back in those days, it wasn't a symbol of Christianity. It was a symbol of crucifixion, a symbol of death. When Jesus said, take up your cross, people, when they were to be crucified by the Romans, they would have to carry their cross up the mountain and be crucified with it. So the picture is you're fixing to die. Jesus was telling these people, if you want to follow me, get ready to die. Of course, his disciples eventually all died. Most were crucified. But a lot of his so-called disciples turned and went away because they didn't want to have no part of that death or taking up their cross. He said there in Matthew 16:24, the principles of the Christian life, I believe, is here in this one verse. If any man will come after me, to have a sincere desire to belong to Christ, he said, if any man be willing to be my disciple. So, can't force it on anybody. We have to be willing. We want to want to be a Christian. Secondly, he said, let him deny himself. That means to renounce self-dependence and selfish pursuits, denying self. Thirdly, he said there to take up his cross, as to embrace the condition which God has appointed and bear the troubles and difficulties he may meet while walking the Christian road. Let me repeat that. To embrace the condition which God has appointed. Some people are not willing to do that. Fourthly, he said to follow me, to imitate Jesus. And when we do suffer, we'll suffer all in his spirit. He'll be with us, remember he's there with us. So to carry the cross is figurative. It's a figurative expression, symbolizing that we must endure whatever is burdensome or trying or considered as disgraceful as we follow Christ. So to take up our cross. I'm glad to see a lot of people stepping up in our church and doing what's needed to be done. But the exhortation I have for us tonight is to take up your cross. Whatever it is, whatever God has for us, we can get through it. He's with us. He's gonna lead the way. Don't try to do it yourself. Let God control it. So let's pray.